3 championships, 30 years old, the absolute peak of basketball dominance, and Michael Jordan just walked away from it all. The year was 1993, and the sports world couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. The most famous athlete on the planet, the guy every kid wanted to be, the face on every billboard, gone, just like that. But here's what most people don't know. That wasn't even the strangest part of his story, because Jordan didn't just leave once. He left twice, came back twice, and each time there were secrets lurking beneath the surface that the public never fully understood. This is the untold story of a man who couldn't figure out when to stop, the hidden forces that pushed him away, and the demons that kept pulling him back. October 6th, 1993, the press conference that nobody saw coming. Michael Jeffrey Jordan, at the peak of his powers, announced he was retiring from professional basketball. The Chicago Bulls had just completed a three-peat, something that hadn't been done since the Celtics dominated in the 60s. Jordan had averaged over 30 points per game for 7 straight seasons. He'd won 3 MVP awards, 3 Finals MVPs, and was widely considered the greatest player to ever touch a basketball. And he was done, just like that. The official reason? He had nothing left to prove. He wanted to spend more time with his family. He'd lost his desire to play. But anyone paying close attention knew there was way more to this story than Jordan was letting on. The summer of 1993 had been absolute chaos for Jordan. In July, his father, James Jordan, was murdered at a rest stop in North Carolina. 2 men shot him while he was sleeping in his Lexus, then dumped his body in a South Carolina swamp. The car was stripped and sold for parts. James Jordan's body wasn't identified for 11 days. This wasn't just any loss for Michael. His father was his best friend, his biggest supporter, the man who'd been there for every single triumph. They talked multiple times every day. James was at every game, sitting courtside, the first person Michael would look for after big moments. Losing him shattered something fundamental in Jordan's world. The pain was unimaginable, and suddenly all those championships and accolades felt hollow and meaningless. But there was another layer to this story that the media was starting to dig into with increasing aggression. Jordan's gambling had become a serious problem, or at least a serious public relations nightmare. In 1992, a man named Richard Esquinas wrote a book claiming Jordan owed him over $1 million in golf betting debts. Jordan disputed the exact amount, but admitted to losing substantial money to Esquinas. Then there was the $57,000 check Jordan wrote to a convicted money launderer named James Buhler. Jordan claimed it was a business loan, but Buhler was later found deceased under suspicious circumstances, and that check became evidence in a criminal investigation.
During the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals, Jordan was spotted at an Atlantic City casino until the early morning hours, then played terribly the next day. The media tore into him. Then reports surfaced that he'd lost hundreds of thousands, possibly over $900,000 betting on golf games. These weren't friendly wagers between buddies. These were serious sums changing hands with people who existed in questionable circles. The NBA launched an investigation. David Stern, the commissioner, was reportedly furious. And this is where things get really interesting, because there's a theory that's persisted for decades. Jordan didn't retire. He was secretly suspended. Think about it. The timing was too perfect. Jordan retires right as the gambling investigation heats up. The NBA avoids a massive scandal by quietly forcing their biggest star to step away for a year or two. Jordan gets to save face by calling it a retirement instead of a suspension. Stern protects the league's image. Everyone wins, except for the fans who deserve the truth. Now, this has never been confirmed, and both Jordan and Stern denied it repeatedly, but the whispers never stopped. Too many pieces fit together too neatly. Jordan himself fueled the speculation by being vague about his reasons, never giving a satisfying explanation for why someone at the absolute peak would just walk away. Beyond the gambling and his father's passing, there were other cracks showing in Jordan's armor that most people missed. The relentless pressure of being Michael Jordan was crushing. He couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed. He couldn't have a normal conversation at a restaurant. He couldn't play a casual round of golf without it making headlines. Every single move was scrutinized, analyzed, criticized. His teammates were getting tired of him too. Horace Grant would later admit there was growing resentment in the locker room. Jordan's intensity, his demands, his way of motivating through humiliation, it wore people down. Scottie Pippen was frustrated about his contract. The supporting cast felt underappreciated. Jordan had created a culture of excellence, but it came at a cost. Jordan himself later admitted something revealing. He'd actually considered retiring after the 1992 championship. That's right, after the second title, before the three-peat was even complete, he was already mentally exhausted. The Dream Team Olympics that summer in Barcelona had been grueling. He was playing year-round with no breaks. His body was starting to break down. He dealt with injuries throughout his career, and at 30, he could feel himself slowing down ever so slightly. Maybe not enough for fans to notice, but he noticed. Every morning he woke up a little stiffer. Every game took a little more out of him. The thought of grinding through another 82-game season, plus playoffs, plus the media circus, plus the endorsement obligations, it was overwhelming. So when his father died, it became the breaking point. Jordan couldn't process that level of grief while living under a microscope. He needed an escape, and in one of the strangest twists in sports history, that escape came in the form of minor league baseball. Yeah, you read that right. The greatest basketball player in the world decided to chase his childhood dream of playing professional baseball. His father had always wanted him to be a baseball player. Michael had been a talented prospect before choosing basketball. Now, grieving and lost, he saw baseball as a way to honor his dad's memory and get away from everything basketball had become.
On February 7, 1994, Jordan signed with the Chicago White Sox and was assigned to their Double-A affiliate, the Birmingham Barons. What followed was both admirable and painful to watch. Jordan approached baseball with the same obsessive work ethic he'd brought to basketball. He took extra batting practice, he studied pitchers, he asked questions constantly. He was humble in a way the public had never seen from him, but the results were brutal. He hit .202 with 3 home runs, 51 RBIs, and 114 strikeouts in 127 games. He struggled with breaking balls, his swing at holes that minor league pitchers exploited ruthlessly. He was a below-average player in a league he was trying to dominate. The media had a field day. Editorial cartoons showed him striking out. Commentators called it a vanity project. Some accused him of taking a roster spot from someone who deserved it more. But Jordan kept showing up, kept grinding, kept trying. There was something almost tragic about watching the most competitive human being on earth fail so publicly at something. He wasn't used to failure. He wasn't used to being average. And baseball was humbling him in ways basketball never had. Looking back, some people saw this period as Jordan working through his grief in the only way he knew how, through competition and struggle. Others still wonder if it was all part of that secret suspension deal, a way to serve his time away from basketball while keeping his name in the headlines. The baseball experiment lasted about a year and a half before reality set in. Jordan wasn't going to make the majors. The White Sox weren't going to call him up as anything other than a publicity stunt. And more importantly, he was starting to miss basketball. The game that had defined his existence for over a decade was calling him back. He watched the Bulls struggle without him during the 1993-1994 season. They were still good. They won 55 games, but they weren't championship material. Hakeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets won the title. Jordan watched from afar, and you could tell something was stirring inside him. The competitor in him couldn't stand seeing someone else hold that trophy. In March 1995, Jordan sent out a fax to media outlets that contained just 2 words: "I'm back." That's it. No explanation, no press conference, just those 2 words, and the sports world exploded. He returned wearing number 45 instead of his iconic 23, because the Bulls had retired that number during his absence. He looked rusty in his first few games, scoring just 19 points against the Pacers in his debut. The Bulls made the playoffs, but lost to the Orlando Magic in the second round. Jordan wasn't quite himself yet. Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway outplayed him. Nick Anderson famously said Jordan's number 45 didn't have the same fear factor as 23. Jordan took that personally, and it fueled him. What happened next is the stuff of legend.
Jordan came back for the 1995-1996 season absolutely possessed. He'd trained all summer like a man on a mission. He switched back to number 23. He was angry, motivated, and determined to prove the doubters wrong. The Bulls went 72-10, setting an NBA record that stood for 20 years. Jordan won his fourth championship, his fourth Finals MVP, and reminded everyone why he was the greatest to ever do it. Then he did it again in 1997, and again in 1998. 6 championships total, 2 perfect three-peats. The 1998 Finals ended with Jordan hitting the game winner over Brian Russell, pushing off slightly, but making the shot that sealed his legacy. He walked off the court knowing he'd just authored the perfect ending.
After that final championship, Jordan stood in the locker room and told his teammates he was 99.9% sure he was done. The Bulls were being dismantled. Phil Jackson was leaving. Scottie Pippen was being traded. The dynasty was over, and Jordan wasn't interested in rebuilding. He was 35 years old. He had 6 rings. He had nothing left to prove to anyone. This time, his retirement made perfect sense. He'd left at the absolute peak, hitting the game winner to win his 6th title, cementing his status as the undisputed greatest ever. It was the perfect Hollywood ending, except it wasn't actually the ending. For the next few years, Jordan did what retired athletes do. He played golf obsessively. He spent time with his family. He worked on his business ventures. In 2000, he became part owner and president of basketball operations for the Washington Wizards, a struggling franchise that needed his expertise and star power. He was supposed to be building a team from the front office, using his basketball IQ to construct a contender. But being in the gym every day, being around young players, watching practices and games, it awakened something in him that he thought he'd put to rest. The itch came back. That insatiable competitive drive that had defined his entire existence started gnawing at him again. Jordan started training with NBA players during pickup games. He was working out harder than he had in years. He was getting in ridiculous shape for a 37-year-old man. People around the league started hearing whispers. Jordan was thinking about coming back. Again, most people dismissed it as rumors. There was no way. He'd already have the perfect send-off. Why would he risk tarnishing that legacy by coming back as an aging player on a bad team? But anyone who really knew Jordan understood. He couldn't help himself. The competitive fire burned too hot. He watched players like Kobe Bryant and Vince Carter dominating, and part of him believed he could still compete with them. There was also the Mario Lemieux factor. In December 2000, hockey legend Mario Lemieux came out of retirement to play for the Pittsburgh Penguins at age 35. It was a huge success. Lemieux proved he could still dominate despite the years away. Jordan watched that comeback and saw a blueprint. If Lemieux could do it in hockey, why couldn't he do it in basketball? He was in better shape than Lemieux had been. He had fewer miles on his body because of his baseball hiatus. The idea started consuming him. He'd show up at pickup games and torch current NBA players. Jay-Z and Beyoncé famously watched one of these sessions and spread word about how good Jordan still looked. The legend was being reborn. On September 10, 2001, Jordan held a press conference in Washington announcing his return to the NBA. He would play for the Wizards, the team he owned a piece of, but there was a catch. He had to divest his ownership and front office role to play, per league rules. So he gave up his executive position and put his ownership on hold to be a player again. He pledged to donate his entire salary, roughly $1 million, to relief efforts for victims of the September 11th attacks that happened the next day. It was a gesture that earned him respect, but it didn't change the fundamental question: was this a terrible mistake?
The doubters were everywhere. Sports columnists wrote that Jordan was ruining his legacy. Talking heads on ESPN debated whether this was ego-driven madness. His own trainer, Tim Grover, tried to talk him out of it. Everyone could see the potential downside. Jordan struggling, looking slow, getting embarrassed on the court by younger players. The myth of invincibility he'd built would crumble. The perfect 1998 ending would be replaced by a sad decline in Washington. But Jordan didn't care about any of that. He needed to compete. He needed to prove to himself that he could still play at the highest level. The opinions of others had never stopped him before, and they wouldn't stop him now. The 2001-2002 season started with massive hype. Jordan was 40 games into 40 years old. Every arena was sold out when the Wizards came to town. Jersey sales exploded, ratings skyrocketed, and at first, Jordan looked pretty damn good. He was scoring over 25 points per game before injuries hit. He had games where he looked like vintage Jordan. The fadeaway jumper was still butter, the basketball IQ was still elite, the competitiveness still burned bright. There was a game against the Nets where he scored 31 points and looked genuinely dominant. Fans allowed themselves to believe maybe this wasn't a mistake after all. But the injuries came fast and brutal. In December, he suffered broken ribs in a collision during a game. He missed multiple games, something the old Jordan almost never did. His knees were constantly sore. He was dealing with tendinitis. Before games, trainers would drain fluid from his knees, a painful procedure that became routine. His body was breaking down in ways it hadn't during his Bulls years. He was still effective when healthy, but he wasn't healthy enough often. The Wizards finished 37-45 and missed the playoffs. Jordan averaged 22.9 points per game on 41.6% shooting. Good numbers, but not great, and definitely not Jordan great. The second season in 2002-2003 was even harder to watch. Jordan's body was betraying him more consistently. There were still flashes. He scored 40 points against the Nets in February 2003, becoming the oldest player ever to score 40 in a game. He had stretches where the old magic flickered to life, but there were also games where he looked painfully slow, where younger players blew past him, where his shots clanked off the rim. These weren't frequent, but they happened enough to chip away at the mythology. Younger fans, who hadn't seen Bulls Jordan, got introduced to Wizards Jordan, and the gap between reputation and reality was jarring. The older fans who'd watched him dominate felt a bittersweet sadness watching their hero's powers fade in real time.
Jordan played his final game on April 16, 2003 in Philadelphia. The 76ers gave him a 3-minute standing ovation before the game. He scored 15 points on just 7 for 21 shooting. After the game, players from both teams came over to shake his hand and pay respect. Larry Brown, the Sixers coach, had his players intentionally foul Jordan so he could leave to one final ovation. It was emotional and respectful, but it also felt anticlimactic compared to that 1998 final shot. This wasn't the ending anyone wanted for the greatest player ever. This was the ending that happens when you don't know when to walk away. In retrospect, Jordan himself admitted the Wizards' comeback was a mistake. In interviews years later, he acknowledged it didn't go how he'd hoped. He talked about hidden agendas in the organization, about people who didn't support him the way he needed. He mentioned that once he gave up his ownership stake to play, certain executives worked against him, knowing he'd eventually return to a diminished role. The whole situation was messier than he'd anticipated. He thought he could control the narrative like he had in Chicago, but Washington was a different animal. The front office was dysfunctional, the roster was flawed, and he was 2 decades removed from his prime physical condition. The legacy question became unavoidable. Did the Wizards' years tarnish what Jordan had built? Reasonable people disagreed. Some argued that nothing could diminish 6 championships and 5 MVPs. The numbers spoke for themselves. Jordan was still the greatest regardless of how his career ended. Others felt that the perfect 1998 send-off had been replaced by something lesser, something human and flawed. The mythology had been pierced. Jordan the God became Jordan the mortal. And once you see mortality, you can't unsee it. The debate continues to this day. But here's what's undeniable. Jordan's story is ultimately about a man who couldn't stop competing even when stopping would have been wiser. It's about someone so addicted to the game, so defined by competition, that retirement felt like death. His first retirement in 1993 was forced on him by circumstances: grief, scandal, exhaustion. He needed the break, even if he didn't want to admit it. The baseball experiment was therapy disguised as sports. His return in 1995 and the second three-peat was vindication, proof that he was still the king. But that second retirement in 1998 should have been final. That was the perfect ending. Everything after was Jordan fighting against time itself, refusing to accept that even he had limits. The Wizards' comeback revealed something deeply human about Jordan. He was terrified of not being Michael Jordan anymore. His entire identity was wrapped up in basketball excellence. Without it, who was he? Just a wealthy businessman? Just a former player? That wasn't enough. He needed the roar of the crowd, the competition, the pressure of performing. He needed to feel alive in a way that only basketball made him feel. So he came back, knowing the risks, understanding it might not work, but unable to resist the pull. That's not weakness. That's being human. It's just that we'd never really seen Jordan be human before. We'd only seen him be mythological.
There's also the question of what would have happened if Jordan had stayed retired after 1998. Would his legend be even greater? Probably. Would he have avoided the criticism and the sad decline? Definitely. Would he have been happier? That's the real question. Maybe Jordan needed those Wizards years to finally get basketball out of his system. Maybe he needed to push until his body literally couldn't do it anymore. Maybe that's the only way a competitor like him could find peace with walking away. Some people can retire gracefully. Jordan wasn't one of them. He needed to crash into the wall at full speed before he'd accept the race was over. Looking at the full arc of his career, Jordan gave us 3 distinct acts. Act 1 was the rise, from rookie sensation to MVP to champion, building the Bulls into a dynasty and becoming the face of basketball. Act 2 was the dominance, the 6 championships, the cultural icon status, the worldwide phenomenon. Act 3 was the reckoning, the aging star trying to recapture magic that had already left the building, learning the hard way that time catches everyone eventually. Most athletes only give us 2 acts. Jordan gave us 3, and the third act, while not what he wanted, taught us something valuable about greatness. Even legends have to figure out when to stop. The gambling issues that haunted his first retirement never fully went away either. Throughout his playing career and into retirement, Jordan's competitiveness manifested in high-stakes gambling. He played cards on the team playing for thousands per hand. He bet enormous sums on golf games. He frequented casinos. Was it a problem? Jordan always insisted he could afford his losses and never bet on basketball. But addiction isn't really about the money. It's about the high, the risk, the competition. Jordan chased that feeling everywhere he could find it. Basketball was just the most socially acceptable outlet for it. When basketball ended, the gambling filled the void. It's another layer to his story that complicated the clean narrative of the perfect champion. His personal life also got messy in ways that affected his public image. His divorce from Juanita Jordan in 2006 cost him $168 million, one of the most expensive celebrity divorces ever. His relationship with his sons was strained at times, particularly with Marcus, who struggled with his father's impossible shadow. His Hall of Fame induction speech in 2009 was widely criticized as petty and vindictive, where he called out old rivals and teammates instead of being gracious. The ruthless competitor who made him great as a player made him sometimes difficult as a person. Perfection on the court didn't translate to perfection off it. As a team owner with the Charlotte Hornets, Jordan's track record has been mixed at best. The team has made the playoffs only 3 times since he took over in 2010. He's been criticized for poor decision-making, stubbornness, and an inability to build a winner from the front office. The same instincts that made him a killer on the court didn't translate to executive success. He drafted busts, overpaid for average players, and couldn't create a winning culture as an owner. It was another reminder that what made Jordan special as a player was unique to that specific skill set. Being the greatest basketball player didn't automatically make him great at everything basketball related. But none of these complications erase what Jordan accomplished or what he meant to basketball. He globalized the sport in ways that are impossible to overstate. He made basketball cool. He transcended sports to become a cultural icon. Kids in remote villages around the world knew his name. The Air Jordan brand revolutionized athlete endorsements and remains a multi-billion-dollar business decades later. He raised the standard for what excellence looked like in basketball. Every great player who came after him was measured against the Jordan standard. Kobe Bryant modeled his entire game after him. LeBron James spent his whole career trying to escape the Jordan comparisons. Jordan's influence extended beyond basketball, too. His competitiveness became aspirational. His work ethic became legendary. Stories of him destroying teammates in practice, of staying late to work on his game, of studying opponents obsessively, these became parables about dedication and greatness. Whether these stories were entirely true or partly mythologized didn't matter. They created a template for excellence that inspired millions. Young athletes across all sports looked to Jordan as proof that talent plus obsessive work equals dominance. He made competitiveness itself seem glamorous. The documentary The Last Dance that came out in 2020 reignited all these debates about Jordan's career. It showed behind-the-scenes footage from the 1997-98 season, his final championship run. It revealed tensions within the Bulls organization, Jordan's sometimes cruel treatment of teammates, and the complicated dynamics that led to the dynasty's end. Some viewers came away loving Jordan even more, respecting his relentless drive. Others saw a different side, the cost of greatness, the casualties of Jordan's obsessive pursuit of winning. It humanized him in ways that both enhanced and complicated his legacy. The documentary also sparked new generations arguing about whether Jordan or LeBron James is the greater player. These debates are ultimately futile. They played in different eras, with different rules and different competition, but they speak to how Jordan's legacy lives on as the benchmark. Even players who never saw him play reference him constantly. His cultural footprint is so massive that 20 years after retirement, he's still the measuring stick. That's not something that happens for many athletes. Ali had it. Babe Ruth had it. Jordan has it. What Jordan never quite found during his playing career was balance. He sacrificed personal relationships for basketball excellence. His first retirement was partly about trying to reclaim some normalcy, some ability to be Michael the person instead of Michael Jordan, the icon. But he couldn't maintain that separation. The basketball part of him was too dominant. It consumed everything else. By the time he retired for good in 2003, he'd spent the better part of 20 years in the public eye, under constant scrutiny, living up to impossible expectations. The toll that took on him psychologically is something he's never fully opened up about, but you can imagine the weight of it. Post-retirement, Jordan has found some of that peace he was searching for, though it took years. He's been more selective about public appearances. He's focused on his family, his business interests, his ownership of the Hornets. He plays golf obsessively, channeling that competitive energy into something lower stakes. He's mellowed slightly with age, though anyone who knows him says the competitive fire still burns. He just learned to direct it in ways that don't require his body to do things it no longer can do. That acceptance didn't come easily or quickly, but it eventually came.
The relationship with his father's memory has also evolved over the decades. James Jordan's murder was never fully resolved in Michael's mind. The two men convicted served their time, but there were always questions about whether others were involved, whether the full truth came out. Michael rarely speaks about it publicly. When he does, you can still see the pain flash across his face. That wound never fully healed. In some ways, all of his comebacks and retirements were about trying to process that grief, trying to find meaning in continuing without his father's presence. Basketball was the language they shared, and playing was a way of keeping that connection alive.
The gambling theories around his first retirement still circulate in conspiracy circles. Every few years, someone writes a new article or makes a documentary suggesting Jordan was secretly suspended. Jordan and David Stern took those rumors to their graves. Stern passed away in 2020, never confirming or denying the story. Jordan has always maintained his retirement was voluntary, driven by grief and burnout. Without hard evidence either way, we're left with a mystery that adds to the mythology. Maybe that's fitting for Jordan. The gaps in the official story leave room for legend to grow. Looking back at all three of his retirements, patterns emerge. Each time Jordan was running from something or toward something. In 1993, he was running from the pressure, the scrutiny, the grief, possibly the gambling scandal. He was running toward healing and normalcy. In 1998, he was leaving on top, having conquered everything there was to conquer. He wasn't running from or toward anything. He'd simply completed his mission. In 2003, he was finally accepting reality, acknowledging that time had caught up to him, that his body couldn't do what his mind still wanted to do. That final retirement wasn't dramatic or perfect. It was just over. The legacy Jordan left is impossible to summarize neatly. He was the greatest winner basketball has ever seen. 6 finals appearances, 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs. He was the most clutch performer in NBA history. Every big moment seemed to find him hitting the big shot. He was the most skilled two-way player of his era, elite on offense and defense, capable of dominating games in every conceivable way. He elevated everyone around him, turning good players into champions. He changed basketball culturally, economically, and stylistically. He's the reason the NBA became a global powerhouse. But he was also someone who couldn't let go, who came back when he shouldn't have, who tarnished his perfect ending because he couldn't resist the competition one more time. He was someone whose personal demons and competitive nature made him difficult to be around. He was someone whose quest for perfection left casualties along the way. The complete picture of Jordan includes both the mythological figure who seemed superhuman on the court and the flawed person who struggled with the same things we all do: ego, addiction, grief, identity.
For younger generations, who only know Jordan through highlights and legend, it's hard to explain what watching him play was actually like. It wasn't just that he won. Lots of players win. It was the way he won. The confidence, ordering on arrogance, the clutch shots that seemed inevitable, the way he'd lock eyes with an opponent and you just knew he was about to destroy them, the sense that rules didn't apply to him, that he existed on a different plane of competition. When Jordan was on the court, you couldn't look away. Something spectacular felt imminent every single possession. The Wizards' years stripped some of that away. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's good for young athletes to see that even Jordan aged, slowed down, dealt with injuries, faced decline. It makes his peak years seem more precious, more special. It also teaches a valuable lesson about ego and knowing when to walk away. Jordan couldn't learn that lesson until he'd exhausted every other option. His greatness required that kind of stubbornness, but his legacy paid the price for it. There's something almost Greek tragedy about it. His greatest strength became his ultimate weakness. The comparisons to other athletes who retired multiple times are inevitable. Muhammad Ali came back too many times, taking brutal damage in fights he shouldn't have taken. Sugar Ray Leonard retired and returned repeatedly. Brett Favre couldn't stay away from football. Michael Phelps retired and came back for one more Olympics. The pattern is consistent. Elite competitors struggle with retirement because competition is their identity. Without it, they feel lost. Jordan fit perfectly into this archetype. The difference was the global scale of his fame and the height from which he fell during his final comeback. There's debate about whether Jordan's flu game in the 1997 finals was actually the flu, or a hangover, or food poisoning. There's debate about whether he pushed off on Brian Russell for his final shot in 1998. There's debate about how good he'd be in today's NBA with different rules and different athleticism. These debates miss the point. Jordan's greatness isn't really about any single game or moment. It's about the sustained excellence over more than a decade. It's about the 6 championships in 8 years. It's about never losing in the finals. It's about the cultural impact that transcended basketball. If Jordan had never come back for the Wizards years, would we remember him differently? Almost certainly. The 1998 ending would stand as one of the great exits in sports history, hitting the championship-winning shot in his final game, walking away as the undisputed best ever. But Jordan couldn't leave us with that clean narrative. He had to come back, had to test himself one more time, had to see if he could defy age and time. That he failed doesn't diminish what came before. It just makes him human instead of mythical. The peace he finally found after 2003 wasn't instant. Friends say it took years for Jordan to fully accept his playing career was over. He'd watch games and get frustrated seeing players make mistakes he knew he wouldn't have made. He'd work out and his body would remind him it wasn't 1993 anymore. The transition from competitor to retired competitor is jarring for everyone, but for someone who'd been the best at something for so long, it was especially difficult. Jordan had to rebuild an identity that didn't center around basketball performance.
His relationship with the current NBA is interesting. He's supportive of LeBron James and other greats, but you can tell he still believes his era was tougher, more physical, more competitive. He's probably right that the game has changed, but every generation believes their era was the peak. Jordan earned the right to that opinion more than most. When he criticizes modern players for switching teams or not being clutch, you can hear echoes of his own insecurities, the fear that maybe the standard he set is being forgotten or diminished. The business side of Jordan's legacy is massive. Air Jordan remains Nike's most profitable line despite Jordan retiring 2 decades ago. The Jordan brand does over $5 billion in annual revenue. Younger kids wear Jordans who've never seen him play, who don't even know he was a basketball player. The shoes transcended their original purpose to become fashion statements, cultural symbols, status markers. Jordan revolutionized athlete endorsements, proving that athletes could build brands that outlived their playing careers. His ownership of the Hornets has been frustrating for Charlotte fans, but it also represents something important. Jordan stayed involved with basketball, just in a different role. He couldn't walk away entirely. He needed to remain connected to the game that defined him. That the Hornets haven't succeeded under his ownership doesn't erase his playing legacy. If anything, it reinforces how unique his playing abilities were. Being great at one thing doesn't guarantee greatness at related things. Jordan the player and Jordan the executive are two different people with two different track records. The number 23 that Jordan wore became iconic. Kids all over the world still choose 23 because of him. LeBron James wore it as homage. The Bulls retired the number twice, once when Jordan first retired, then again after his final retirement. That number on a Bulls jersey immediately conjures his image, his highlights, his championships. It's one of the most recognizable numbers in all of sports, right there with Gretzky's 99, Ruth's 3, and Ali's butterfly bee fighting style. Jordan's defensive abilities often get overlooked in discussions about his greatness because his scoring was so spectacular. But he was a 9-time all-defensive first-team selection. He won Defensive Player of the Year in 1988 while also winning MVP. He could lock down the opposing team's best perimeter player while also dropping 30 points. That two-way dominance is rare. Modern NBA players tend to specialize, either elite offense or elite defense. Jordan was genuinely elite at both ends simultaneously, which made him virtually impossible to game plan against. The Phil Jackson factor in Jordan's championships can't be ignored either. Jackson's triangle offense maximized Jordan's abilities while involving teammates enough to keep everyone engaged. Jackson's Zen philosophy helped Jordan channel his intensity productively. The trust between coach and superstar was crucial to the dynasty. When Jackson left after 1998, Jordan left too. That wasn't coincidental. Jordan knew he couldn't win with a different coach, a different system, a different group of players who understood his demands.
So what's the final verdict on Michael Jordan's 3 retirements and 2 comebacks? The truth is complicated, just like the man himself. He walked away twice before finding peace, and that journey tells us more about greatness than any highlight reel ever could.
The first retirement in 1993 was a man breaking under pressure, grief, and scrutiny he couldn't escape. The baseball detour was therapy, disguised as sports. The comeback in 1995 and the second three-peat proved he was still the king, still untouchable when it mattered. The 1998 retirement should have been the end. That perfect shot, that perfect moment, that perfect exit. But Jordan couldn't leave it there. The Wizards' comeback from 2001 to 2003 showed us something we'd never seen before. Jordan being mortal, Jordan aging, Jordan struggling. It wasn't pretty, and it cost him the storybook ending he'd crafted in 1998. Yet there's something almost beautiful about it too. It proved that even the greatest competitor who ever lived was still human, underneath all that greatness. He had the same struggles we all face, figuring out who you are when the thing that defined you is gone, accepting that time catches everyone eventually, learning when to finally let go. Jordan gave us 6 championships, countless unforgettable moments, and a standard of excellence that still defines basketball decades later. But he also gave us something more valuable, a complete story. Not just the mythology of perfection, but the messy reality of what happens when perfection faces time. He walked away twice, came back twice, and finally found peace when his body made the decision his mind couldn't. That's not a failure. That's being human. And somehow knowing that Michael Jordan struggled with the same demons we all do, the fear of irrelevance, the addiction to competition, the difficulty of letting go, makes his greatness mean even more. 3 retirements, 2 comebacks, 1 legend who couldn't stop until there was nothing left to give. That's the real story of Michael Jordan. Not just the greatest basketball player ever, but a man who had to crash into the wall at full speed before he could finally walk away. And in the end, maybe that's exactly how it had to be. Because legends don't fade away quietly. They burn until there's nothing left to burn. Jordan burned brighter and longer than anyone else. And when the fire finally went out, he'd given us everything he had. The good, the bad, the perfect, and the flawed. All of it. That's not just greatness. That's immortality.